what slowly happens is you slowly begin to, I mean, it's a funny word, but you slowly begin to brainwash yourself. You wash your brain of all its misconceptions, and the brain becomes clear, the mind becomes clear, and sees this. And then the more you do this, the more it can live from this.
Okay, so the constant reminder of our true identities is the way to wash our brains.
That's true. That's exactly right.
So that's the tool we use. We constantly go back to that understanding or that notion.
Well, that actually investigation. I mean, for instance, at any moment, you can immediately, if you look, you can immediately see that anything that's happening to you, any thought or sensation, is just an object appearing in awareness. You can see that. So if you have a negative thought which causes you suffering, you can immediately, and suffering actually, mental suffering is a key actually to restart the investigation, because when you're identified as pure awareness, there is no mental suffering. It doesn't mean to say there's no pain. I mean, obviously there's physical and mental pain in existence. There is. But when I'm talking about suffering, I'm talking about actually relating what's happening to an imaginary separate object, and then stewing on what the effect that's having on that object. I mean, for instance, say your mother dies. Now, obviously, if your mother dies, it's painful in that you will never see that person again, and you'll have all these lovely memories of that person. However, this pain becomes magnified into unbelievable mental suffering when you apply the small self to it, and you start to say things like, "Oh, it's so terrible! I'll never see that person again." When you start to wallow in the loss and the way it's affecting you as a separate object, then it causes mental suffering. Whereas if it's just seen from the point of view of pure awareness itself, it is another manifestation of that same consciousness that is now no longer exists separately as a manifestation. The essence has not been lost. Consciousness is never lost. It's just the manifestation that's gone. And you can still have lovely memories of that person, but it's the self-pity, that's the word. It's the self-pity that causes the suffering. It's the mental suffering is and that's caused by misidentification as yourself, as a small individual self, a separate self.
Whereas, so just to recap that particular section, would you agree that when we believe ourselves to be these separate entities or separate beings, disconnected from, the universal consciousness, if you will, or even not recognizing the existence of this universal consciousness of which we are all a part, then you suffer. You open yourself to suffering. Whereas if you step back into a notion that supporting the idea that you are part of this whole, then even if you suffer a death of a loved one or some difficulties in your life, you can look at it as if the universal consciousness would be looking at that event, because it is not affected by it. It is just observing. Okay. Brilliant.
Well, that's true.
I got it.
Yeah, you do. Because in fact, that universal consciousness is always looking at everything that occurs. You are just a vessel through which that does that. Actually. We are instruments through which that observes, not only observes, it actually engages with its own manifestation.
Wow.
Because we manifest, because we are manifestations of that. That's what we are. Then, and everything that every thought and every sensation we have appears in that awareness that we are. Then it also appears in that awareness which is universal. So you could argue that every experience that we have is also experienced by that. So we are best instruments to which that can experience its own manifestation.
Wow.
Which is
that's powerful.
That's another step forward. But yes, it is.
Yes.
It is actually.
It's very empowering.
Well, yes, actually, because I mean, we were talking about self-judgment. Once you can fully identify with and as an expression, an instrument of that, the universal consciousness that we are, then that basically negates all self-judgment, because there's no small self to be judged. There is no small self. So that, and a so interesting aside here is, if you read accounts of people who've had near-death experiences, you will find that none of them have experienced any judgment by the spiritual entities they've met on the other side. The only judgment that they've ever experienced is self-judgment. The universal consciousness does not judge us in any way, shape or form. All judgment is self-judgment.
Thank heavens for that.
I know.
I'm sure.
So that's just another benefit of identifying with the universal. Because the thing is, you see, that if you identify with the universal and you identify all others with the universal also, then you will naturally treat them as you would like to treat yourself. You will treat them as yourself.
Wow.
Right? Which is what Christ said you have to do. Treat your neighbour as yourself.
Amazing,
and that just becomes a natural way of relating to other people, because there is no separation. The separation is only in ephemeral manifest form, but that's not their actual essence. It's not in essence. In essence, there's no separation.
Wow. So we are all one.
We are.
We're all
in essence,
one.
we're all one. Appearing as the many, just for fun. That's what I say. Yes.
Just for fun.
Just for fun.
Okay, so what then? How? With modern life, right? There are so many things that get us stuck in our own minds. I am particularly guilty of this, and I'm constantly fighting with my own mind. So. And I'm sure a lot of my viewers out there feel the same and will be going through the same things. So what would your suggestion be? Right?
Well,
what process can they incorporate in their lives, or even in their daily routines, to sort of start working out, a balance with their own minds?
Well, you actually, in a way, you put your finger on it. That's what you were saying. You say, I am myself guilty of this. But then who is this self that's guilty of anything? See, this is the point. You actually have to investigate and discover this essence, this pure awareness that you are. And then you actually have to be true to that in your day-to-day life. So, and a key to when you're not true to that is when mental suffering occurs, or you cause anybody else to suffer. Either one. If mental suffering commences, or you're causing somebody else to suffer, this is nearly always caused by misidentification of yourself or them as a separate object. If you can use that as a wake-up call to restart the investigation, then that's basically the key. The key is whenever. I mean, I don't wander around thinking, I'm awareness all the time. I don't.
That would be funny.
Yeah, it would be ridiculous.
Okay, someone's lost it a bit.
I know, but a lot of religious paths are. People walk around repeating mantras all the time, 100% of the time, or they try to stay identified with. They try to pray to God all the time. I mean, there are people who try to fill their whole mind stuff with this, and that is a way, but it's not necessary in this process. In this process, once you realise that you are this pure awareness, you can live spontaneously, but alert for when you stop identifying with awareness. And the key is when suffering occurs. Your mental suffering, or you're causing suffering to anybody else. If either of those things are occurring, there's misidentification taking place. Okay,
and you said before that, the investigation is the key. Once you find that you are misidentifying then you should basically start your investigation. So talk to us about that investigation,
well, now,
the process, what's
yes,
involved, what is this investigation?
So, I mean, this process that we've been through, starting
Yes.
from this moment is thoughts, sensations, and awareness of these, and then drawing these conclusions in a series of steps. That is an investigation which I carried out for many years, at least 3 times a day. But, so I recommend that everybody spends at least 20 minutes 3 times a day investigating this and seeing. And the further you go, the more you discover. You'll never run out of things to discover. Ever, because we're investigating the limits.
It's infinite.
That's right. Yes. This is the finite investigating the infinite. So you're never going to.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and the more often you do this investigation, always start from the very base point. Don't jump in halfway through.
Yeah.
The more you actually convince your mind that you are awareness. You actually have to convince. This is weird, I know, but you have to convince your own mind that
it's not the boss of you.
That's right. That's exactly the point. The mind is a wonderful servant.
Yes.
I mean, it's an amazing tool, but it's a terrible master. While it thinks that you are...
Could not agree more.
Yeah. So while the mind thinks it is you... And this is the problem with Western psychology. Western psychology is based on the fact that you are your mind. You go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, they would immediately... They assume that you are your mind. That's their natural assumption. Now, if you start off with that assumption, you've already started off with a misidentification, and then you're trying to help the person out of it. I mean, really,
there is no hope. It's going to be constant.
I actually, that's why I don't have a lot of faith in Western psychology and Western psychiatry, because they believe that you are your mind, and really, we need to go beyond this belief.
And it comes back to that Reyna Descartes.
Yes,
notion of I think, therefore I am. And it
got
seems to have pervaded throughout society and social thinking.
That's right.
Okay. And so, talk to us a bit more about the universal consciousness.
Well, no, I will, but let's just finish answering your previous question.
Yes.
So I recommend that at least 3 times a day you spend 20 minutes heavily and deeply involved in this investigation. Now, personally myself, I like to be as completely comfortable when I'm doing this so the body doesn't bother me. So I lie down flat on the floor in, it's called the corpse pose, with my legs slightly apart and feet falling outwards, my arms like this. I'm just lying, and I have a blanket so I don't get cold. I have a pillow under my head. I like to feel completely comfortable so that I'm not distracted while I'm doing it. That's the first thing. I know a lot of meditators sit cross-legged, but they're good luck to them. I prefer the comfy approach.
Yeah.
Okay. But the other thing about this investigation is that's the daily practice. But you can carry it out in this moment. As soon as a jot of mental suffering occurs, you could look at that and say, am I that which is suffering, or am I that which is aware of the suffering?
Wow, am I that which is suffering, or am I that which is aware of the suffering?
That's right, because the suffering...
Wow, powerful.
Yeah, and the suffering is always a mixture of thought and sensation.
Yes.
And you're not that. You are that which is aware of those. So in fact, this investigation can be carried out instantly, like that.
Yeah, wow.
So every time any mental suffering occurs, or any thought of, even thoughts of how great I am, or how terrible I am. And in fact, any time that you objectify yourself in your own thinking, that's misidentification. It doesn't matter what you say about yourself. If you
whether good or bad.
Either good or bad.
Wow.
If you objectify yourself, i.e. if you consider yourself to be an object that has a quality, then that's misidentification. Because you're not an object.
Okay. How is that?
That's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. I'm a bit taken aback. I'm like, wow. Okay, so what about identifying and having or embodying the qualities of consciousness?
Well, yes. When you're correctly identified as consciousness itself, then the qualities of that automatically. They're there all the time, but they appear because before that...
They're innate.
They're innate.
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 Not innate. Sorry. Yes.
You could say innate, but I wouldn't.
No. Innate.
Innate.
Yes.
Yeah, they're there all the time. Yes. But you have covered them up with the layers of the imaginary self, which is actually illusory, but they're like, these are like filters, and they completely covered these up. And it's like another example is like taking the leaves off a pond. If you've got an autumn pond that's covered in leaves, you don't see the pond, but you slowly start taking the leaves off, and eventually the pond appears, and finally there's this pure, lovely, still, serene pond.
Yes,
but it's been covered by our misidentifications, our thoughts about ourselves are these leaves that cover the pond of pure awareness itself, or the lake.
Brilliant.
So, so these qualities that you talk about, they're innate to consciousness itself, and all you have to do is actually uncover them, discover them within yourself. They're there all the time, and that's why when you're identified with pure awareness itself, you can trust yourself to act spontaneously and not judge how you're acting all the time, because that awareness that you are is spontaneously loving, calm, peaceful, you know, all these. It has many beautiful qualities. Moving out the rain here.
Yes. We're out in the bush.
We are, yeah. So, so you don't actually have to. See, a lot of spiritual practices have qualities they say you have to foster to become more spiritual. You have to become good, you have to become compassionate, you have to become detached, etc., etc. But these qualities are all natural and innate within consciousness itself. So rather than foster the qualities, you have to foster the identification with the consciousness or awareness, and then they just come out by themselves.
Wow.
So it's very simple. It's actually very simple.
Yes.
You need to...
What's the hardest part about it?
Well, the hardest part...
Because the question that comes to mind is something so simple. Surely, I mean, people would be picking this up, and yet people don't. Why? What makes it so difficult?
Because it's so simple.
That's a bit of a paradox.
It is. It is a paradox. It's so simple. People cannot believe that can possibly be true. Because if it was true, and it was that simple, then in theory, everybody could be self-realized. Yeah. And in fact, they can.
Yes.
Very simply. However, it's the misidentification that's been caused by... It's actually caused by... As soon as you're born, you're given a name. Your name is Peter. These are your parents, you're white, you're English, you're Christian, etc. These misidentifications are heaped upon us.
Labels upon labels.
By society, by our parents, by our peers. They just keep heaping them on.
So true.
And we've accumulated this huge burden, of labels. Yeah. And that's the wonderful thing about waking up, is that suddenly that whole burden just drops. Because it's all non-existent. It seems like it's existence, it seems like it's heavy, but in fact, when you're awake, it has no weight at all. It's just another load of shit appearing in awareness. Sorry about the word.
That's all right. That's all right. We'll just pause for a second, guys, and then get back to you after the break as we reset our scene because we're getting rained on, literally. All right, see you soon.
Yeah, okay. So how long have we been going?
Brilliant. What do you think? Isn't the interview awesome? Yes. Yes, all good. Awesome.
Well, we've been going about an hour. Probably
52 minutes.
15 minutes, yeah. So
okay, we'll probably have it come back and have a wrap up then.
Or we can just carry on at a later day, although,
at a later time we could.
Well, there's a lot more we could talk about, though. But
but let's wrap up this segment then. So we have a closure.
Okay.
And
so we just wait for the rain to stop?
Yeah, actually, let's not move anything.
No, don't move anything. It won't last.
It was perfect before.
It won't last long. Just move them out of the way.